I'm joined in the studio by Ezra Koenig. Hey!
Hey, what's up?
So good to see you, dude.
Good to see you too.
On this day of days.
It's a big day.
It's all been leading up to this week, and I've enjoyed the gradual trickle of information because people have been starved for info. So how are you feeling, though, just now that there's this culmination of, the longest wait for the share of new music you've had with this project so far?
Well, we'll see how I feel in a few days, but generally, I've kind of felt like there's something about being gone for a long time that once you get out of this kind of the awkward middle zone of 3 or 4 years, you kind of reach a place of peace, and you're, I can picture the time in between the first album and Contra, and between Contra and Modern Vampires of the City. It felt like stressful. Albums 1, 2, and 3 felt, especially after the first album, you can imagine how many people thought that we were a flash in the pan. Even like people who liked us, I think were a little bit, this is like a novelty.
They're like, I hope they can do it. I really hope they can.
And let alone the haters. And then, so with the second album, there's tremendous pressure to follow up, and it has to be good, but it also has to be fresh, whatever. Third album took a tiny bit longer, but even then, I also felt this pressure, and that I really wanted to cap off this trilogy of albums with something that showed another side of the band, another side of me as a writer, so even that felt like I didn't feel out of the woods until the third album came out and the fans liked it and it did well. And then even on top of that, there was we hit certain highs on the third album campaign that, I kind of hadn't imagined. Then after that, you chill out a bit. You're kind of like, all right, I did it. 3 albums, that's a career. So I more or less was chill. A few years after that, you start getting people being like weird comments. For some reason, there was like a moment where a lot of people just kept saying, you know what, I'm not going to be a fan anymore if you don't release music soon. I'm going to go be a fan of somebody else. And at first I was like, oh my God, we're going to lose fans. And then again, after like a year or something, you get to this point where you're like, oh wait, you're supposed to lose fans. And maybe we didn't even lose them. I don't know. But
Welcome back, guys.
But some part of me is also like, I guess all I'm saying is that after 3 albums, you kind of have some time to reflect, go live your life, go do other things, and you lose some of that, or it's been a process, but I've lost some of that anxiety of just like always having to perform and maintain and grow, to the point that I actually, if I saw a comment like that a few years ago, I might be like freaked out, like, oh my God, this is what I get for taking a year off.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I messed up. I waited too long to start the album. I would have freaked out. And then at a certain point, I got a little more zen about it. And I was like, why would you... That's what happens with fan bases. There's core people who stay forever. If somebody truly is so angry that Vampire Weekend took a long time to make an album, that they don't want to like Vampire Weekend, maybe they never really got the Vampire Weekend ethos in the first place, man.
Yeah, man.
That's kind of what I thought. I have this like funny thing too, where I think, and I've never dragged it out longer than it had to be. There's all sorts of reasons why the album took a longer time, but I also just have this feeling like if you're like a true Vampire Weekend head, you get it. I don't know. I think that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I speak for us true heads when I say totally get it. Man, next time it's going to be 8 years between albums, and I'm going to be like, I know I said we totally get it, but we don't get it.
That's pushing it. No, I kind of feel like the juices are flowing again. In some ways, it almost seemed like the first 3 needed a pause, ended on a high note, and now now we're in kind of this new phase. It's chapter 4, maybe chapter 5 comes quicker. I'm feeling it.
Well, that's good to hear. And we are very excited, of course, here at SiriusXMU to be able to play people these new songs, 2021 and Harmony Hall, both of which I'll play this hour coming up on SiriusXMU. Ezra's hanging with me for a bit, so we're going to delay the gratification slightly longer and play you this from Modern Vampires of the City, Ya Hey, on SiriusXMU. Ezra and I'll be back soon. Earlier today, we got these awesome new Vampire Weekend tracks, which I will be playing for the first time on my show coming up soon. And Ezra from the band is here with me in our Los Angeles studio. I've got a lot of questions, but I'll try and keep it fairly brief this time, and maybe we can expand at some point later. But yeah, I wonder with the album as a whole, whether during these 5 years that elapsed, some of the kind of musical zones you seem to have been exploring a bit more in recent years, like the jammier stuff or, the kind of Dead influence stuff. whether as the album marinated for longer, did those tendencies become greater and those threads increase, Like, was it in the end for the best that you had 5 years to let those sounds find their way out?
Certainly, the reason it took this long is because it needed to. It needed a few years just to chill, not think about it, live life, make cartoons, not think about music. And then I was really excited to get back into music. And then once we're actually working on the album, then you have to think about what is interesting to you now. And for whatever reason, those questions are easier when you're younger. You're just not thinking about it. You just do what you think is cool. And then you get older and suddenly it's like for the first time, you're kind of like, wait, do I know what, it just feels different than when you're young. Do I know what's cool? So then you really just have to focus on what do I think is cool and what do I think is cool for Vampire Weekend? Because that's also a danger zone that I was a little frightened of, is that I think sometimes people get older and they, I don't know, start to get worried about their relevance. So that was another good thing about the time off. It helped me to care less about relevance. And you're like, obviously the most relevant people are relevant to themselves and their fan base. It's obvious, and yet it can be very confusing for us aging musicians.
Stop.
But yeah, it took time to like really, really think about what Chapter 4 would mean musically, lyrically, all those things. And yeah, of course, I'm always listening to music, and especially old music. I don't know if I want to say the album's influenced by the Dead specifically, not because I don't love the Dead, but because as somebody who grew up on the East Coast in the 90s, I know how passionate the hardcore fans are. And even someone like me who's a big fan, it's like...
You don't want to get all John Mayer on it.
Yeah, you don't want to step too far and
offense.
And I know some deep cuts, although I will say, and maybe sometime in the future, I'd be happy to talk more about the Dead at length. But I will say that I'm also a radio personality. I don't know if you knew that, Jenny. That
I'm aware of the Time Crisis program.
On Time Crisis, my co-host is Jake Longstreth, who's been a friend forever. I met him through his brother Dave of Dirty Projectors. And I will say this, that early on, years ago, whenever this started, Jake and some other guys, Jake's a painter, but also a big music head, and he and some other guys started a Grateful Dead cover band. And this is before John Mayer was playing with the Dead. And he was just like, come through. They played at an art gallery. This is maybe 5-6 years ago or something. And this is also at this time when I felt like it became very fashionable with a lot of the musicians that I know. People were in bands to talk about how rock sucks and pop is great. And I've always been like a why not both type dude,
right.
I hate the binary. I'm just kind of like
a genre that can do both.
Yeah, exactly. So I've never been that into and I'm also into like restrictions. Like if rock sucks so bad, then make it cool. I don't know, like whatever. There's a lot of ways to think about it. But anyway, that was in the air at the time. And so whatever this was 5 or 6 years ago, I remember going to see Jake's show. The band was called Dick Pics at the time. They've since changed their name to Richard Pictures. I thought it was a more respectful name, which I support and agree with. So I went to go see Dick Pics. Now, I'll just call them Richard Pictures. I went to see Richard Pictures. And, I hadn't seen a Dead cover band maybe since I was like a kid on vacation in Vermont or something, So just seeing these guys enjoy playing that music and reinterpreting it. And again, this is way before Dead & Co. I don't even know if I want to say it was the music, but I was just like, ooh, this makes me want to play guitar. Just seeing my friend up there. And because when you start a Grateful Dead cover band, especially then, maybe today, there's a little more cachet, but 5 or 6 years ago, there's no better example of love of the game. It was like, it wasn't fashionable. It was just guys who loved that music. And so I did say to a few people, I was like, the best band that I've seen in the past 5 years was Dick Pics. so I don't want to get
and they did open for Vampire Weekend.
Oh yeah, now Richard Pictures is totally part of the family, and the whole crew is great. They opened for us in Ojai, they've opened for us in LA. They're part of the family, but in a very specific way, I was inspired by Richard Pictures. That's one of, when you hear the record, there's a million influences, but I will say that there's certain things that I let on this album, because a lot of Vampire Weekend songs start out very austere. And there are times, and back in the day, everything, we wanted it to be very formal, a lot of space, things come in, they come out, it's very composed. And on this album, every once in a while, I'm still a little bit that guy, so I can only let loose so much. But there were times, I don't know if I'd say jammy, but I would say, I was like, let's let this part be a little shaggier, let it be crunchy. We bring in some like shredder, OG studio musicians. There's a guy who plays all over the album. Actually, his name is Greg Lees. He's a guitarist. He also plays pedal steel. He's just like an old school dude. He's like toured with all sorts of legends. And just, to sometimes bring in people like that and just be like, for instance, the guitar solo on Harmony Hall, that's very composed. And if you can picture like me writing it on piano, it's very Vampire Weekend. It's just like arpeggio. But then he kind of, plays it. And it suddenly became a little twangier. And then we asked him, like, what might you do to end it? And he just, adding those tiny little crunch, a little goes a long way with the crunch. Or even like, I played a lot of the piano, but the parts at the end, there's this guy, Tommy, who plays with Haim. And we're very close with Haim and via Ariel. We're all kind of always in the mix together. So, like, Tommy, do you have anything that you might do at the end? And he just kind of like went to town, doing his kind of like piano stuff at the end. And, I wouldn't, it just adds these little like bursts of flavor that I found myself like really craving. So I think the album is an interesting mix of kind of like some of our classic super composed minimalism plus these moments of, I feel like a lot of times in the studio, I'd say, like, let's let that part be a little shaggier. And then sometimes people are like, what do you mean by that? But sometimes people would know. I was like, it's a little shaggier.
I mean, I can imagine, thinking about all of the existing material from Vampire Weekend, what that means, because it is, I don't think manicured would be an inaccurate description of some of what makes, that's some of a defining element. I feel like that Vampire Weekend songs are well arranged and very well put together, without, there's no sloppiness to it,
Yeah.
And sloppy obviously seems like a pejorative, but it sounds like what you're saying is more that the life that you capture in something that's not as perfect.
Yeah. Well, I think also
that's
like
the flavor.
And maybe as I get older too, when I was young, when you're young, you have to make all these like rules for yourself. So when Vampire Weekend started, we literally like wrote kind of a manifesto, and I specifically had some very strong rules. It's like no t-shirts on stage, got to wear collared shirts, just because it's like that seemed like right, and we had to be like none of that, like no guitar downstrokes, da 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 da. Even though I grew up loving the Ramones, it's still you like gotta kill your favorites. Be like, we can't do that. Everything. So you set all these rules, and I think also and I think something that Rostam and I shared together, both we like the conceptual compositional element of music. So I feel like at that moment, I kind of looked down on like shredders, like dudes who just post up at Guitar Center, just like playing blues licks. And then as I get older, I'm just starting to be like, you know what? There's a quiet dignity in just like playing Clapton at Guitar Center. I just started to kind of like, I think also as you get older, you just start to see the joy, all your little rules and divisions you create about who you are and what you like, and that's very important, especially when you're in like middle school. Like you like that band, you suck, and I like this shit, and and I've always had very snobby music taste when I was younger, and then you get older and you just start to really feel that anybody who brings joy to what they're doing musically, it just makes you feel good. And then suddenly people who just truly love their instrument, which maybe is not a very conceptual thing. It's definitely not some like, you don't need a manifesto to love your instrument. People just love their instrument. They love to play. They love learning about a style or something. Then you realize how beautiful that is too, and that becomes a part of it. So anyway, yeah, a little bit of flavor, a little bit of guitar. I don't want to say Guitar Center, but a little bit of shagginess. And anyway, I say all that, but then, you listen to 2021, and it's kind of like one of the most minimalist Vampire Weekend songs ever. So, it's always a push-pull, but you're trying to add some other dimensions for sure.
It's Jenny Eliscu, and Ezra from Vampire Weekend is joining me today, as we're so thrilled to have these new songs, one of which you just heard, the other coming up next, and also today the mystery of what FOTB, Flip of the Bird, no, it's not that, stands for. It's been a subject of speculation for the past week, and I've loved seeing what?
It really turned into a thing, like
inadvertent meme.
Well, because I put a lot of thought into this note that I wanted to write to the fans. It was important to me that I wrote a little note to the fans before we dropped music. because I don't know, I just had this feeling like when you drop music that goes out to the whole world, but like I wanted to acknowledge our true fans who'd been waiting and waiting. So I wanted to write them a note. So I put so much thought into it. And then I was like, what can I tell them about the album? And I was like, I don't know if I want to tell them the title yet. I'll just give them the initials. We did that before. I just didn't think it would be such a big deal, but that really was like the big takeaway from it. And the last album, we did post the initials earlier, and that album was called MVOTC. And I just think there's something like maybe not as fun to guess about that. It's just a little complicated.
Right.
So the FOTB, I noted there's a lot more fun. It really became a thing, and a lot of people did get it right.
So what is it?
Oh, it's Father of the Bride.
Father of the Bride. Ladies and gentlemen, if you hadn't already looked that up this morning on the internet, FOTB stands for Father of the Bride, which is going to be the 4th studio album by Vampire Weekend. You are going to be sharing some more songs in pairs.
That's the basic idea.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, because the album's 18 songs, that's another thing about this album that makes it a little different. And there's no filler, you know, like truly, I actually raked myself over the coals getting it down to 18 to make sure every song had something to say. But with Vampire Weekend albums, I've always prided ourselves on the idea, or this is something that I've always said, is like, will this song be somebody's favorite? You know, because a lot of times the single's somebody's favorite, or track 1's somebody's favorite, but whose favorite is track, 9? You know, so I want every song to be someone's favorite. And even with an 18-song album, I also believe every one of these songs could be someone's favorite song. However, that's a lot of songs for everybody to spend time with. So, you know, a lot of times people release 3 songs leading up to a record, and that's cool. But I was like, I don't know, I just love pairing them. So we talked about, should we release 2 or 3 songs before the record? And I was like, something felt kind of empty about that to me, given how much music there is. And I was like, I could do three pairs. And everybody said, oh, okay, we could do that, sure. And it's also like fun to, it also, you know, it's almost like some old school A-side, B-side type thing.
Right.
Sometimes you like the A-side better, and that's always the one that gets more attention, but you know, don't sleep on the B-side.
For real, though, that's a good rule in general. Don't sleep on the B-side. And we've already played you the B-side, which in this case is 2021. We still have Harmony Hall to get to, but I still want to talk to Ezra some more as well. So I'm going to delay slightly longer with this Subtract tune that features Ezra as a guest vocalist. And a song that VW, I remember back at Lollapalooza, you guys played this in your set, which I enjoyed mightily, along with the Vamp on the Seinfeld theme song by Bayo. But I digress. We'll listen right now to New Dorp, New York, more from Ezra Koenig, and more new Vampire Weekend coming up on SiriusXMU. So Ezra, tell me what you remember about the genesis of this tune.
Harmony Hall, this is classic with a lot of Vampire Weekend songs, that there's kind of put a couple things together. So the first thing that I ever wrote for that song was some of the lyrics and kind of the Baroque piano part, which is still an element in the song. It's kind of a breakdown now. But so the first thing I wrote had this feel like almost like some 60s Kinks Baroque. It was like bum ba da 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 da. So it was like this Baroque thing. And we actually did try to play it as a band, and it was just like a little cute. It didn't feel how I wanted the song to feel. So, and then this is why this shit takes so long too, is that after years of playing it that way, at some point I just started to play it more like a house style, you know, or like baggy, as they said in the UK. And I was starting to be like, oh, maybe there could be a baggy element. And I started, instead of going bum ba da 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 da, I started going bum 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 bum. And I was like, that's cool. And I was like, that could be an element. So then I had those two things. And then way later, and some lyrical ideas. And then way later, I was sitting at a guitar playing. I started just writing this very simple guitar bum ba da 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 da. And then I had that, and then, you know, at some point, I wanted to work at Harmony Hall, and I was like, well, what's the verse? And sitting around trying to think of the verse, and I was like, oh, I could put that guitar riff in that key, that could be the verse. And I was like, well, then what do I say in the verse? And then suddenly, it started to feel like a song, and I was like, okay. So that was basically it.
Right.
A piano part and a guitar part put together.
Did it feel good to you pretty immediately, though, as something you're like, that's a keeper, that's one to... I know you had a couple dozen songs at least in the works, but yeah. Does it usually feel great to you right away when it ends up being one as great as, if I might say, as the song?
Oh, thank you. The first time that we put together the guitar and the piano, we were very psyched in the studio. We're like, this is going to be great. I don't even want to say how long ago that moment was because it might be a little shocking. And then you know, then we're working on other songs, and then I actually wrote the lyrics fairly quickly to that. And then, you know, there's just like with us, we always like, we'll put down like a MIDI version of the guitar solo, and then we're like waiting for somebody to come play it for real, because I can't play it for real. So we're waiting and waiting, and then it's amazing how like sometimes it feels like you accomplish 90% of the song in the first 2 days, and then the next year or 2 years or 3 years is, you look back and you're like, what did we do all that time? We were EQing the vocals, and we were slightly changing the groove, and you know, layering an extra snare drum. It's like that kind of stuff that really turns into the arduous work. So yeah, off the jump, very excited, and then, you know, somehow that almost lost enthusiasm for it over the course of working. That's what happens with every song.
Yeah.
And then finally it's like, it's done. You know, mixing, mastering, that's a whole process too, you know.
Right. Well, I'm sure at a certain point you cease to be able to tell whether you like it anymore, because you're so in the weeds with it.
Oh yeah, and then you have all these people that you work with being like, this was done 6 months ago. What's the matter with you? And you don't know, and that's always a tough one, because you don't know. Sometimes they're right, and then other times you have to be like the one person who's like, no guys, it can be better. And it's a very thin line between being correctly waiting and working harder to take something to the next level / being an annoying person who just doesn't know what's happening anymore. It's a very thin line.
Well, yeah, I would say on behalf of Vampire Weekend fans everywhere, we're glad that you did all the things you did to it, because it sounds fucking great.
Oh, thank you.
It took how long it took, and we're going to play it right now on
Awesome.
SiriusXMU. I look forward to talking some more and hearing more of the new songs in the coming months. Right now, though, Harmony Hall. Ezra, thank you so much.
Thank you.